Should hard work guarantee success? Are you an NPC if you enjoy watching football? And was the COVID vaccine peak capitalism? We'll discuss these questions and more on today's episode of Good Take, Bad Take. Hey friends, welcome to this episode of Good Take, Bad Take. This is the show where we gather takes that we see in our social media feeds each week. We go through the ones and we critique or praise them. My name is Britt, and I'm here with my co-host Donnie. Before we get started, make sure to like, share, comment, leave us a message or anything on any of these socials. You can find us on Good Take, Bad Take Pod on Instagram and Good Bad Take Pod on Twitter and YouTube. And without further ado, let's get into some of these takes. So the first one is a post on Twitter, and it writes, "Did it hurt when you found out that hard work doesn't guarantee success in a capitalistic society?" What do you think?
Well, it's one of those things where it depends on what you mean in a capitalistic or a capitalist society, because if you're talking about a pure capitalist society, well, then you're wrong. If you're talking about a social democrat, capitalist, pseudo corporatist hellscape, then maybe there's some argument to what you're saying. But the vast majority of what people complain about stems not from the merits or demerits of capitalism, but from the entrenched powers of sort of a corporatist world in which we live. Now, it's not to say that every single person who is successful had to work hard, and it's not to say that everyone who works hard will be as successful as another person. You can work really hard, but if you're not providing anything that creates value, then you're certainly not going to be quote unquote successful. I mean, if you're working really hard at building a bridge and then tearing it down and doing that over and over and over, you're not providing value to anyone. You're just working really hard. So on the one sense, this take is actually correct, but I think the major takeaway and more of the idea behind this take and the message is this idea that if you work hard, doing something productive, you're not necessarily guaranteed to do well. And even then, in a capitalist society, if you are working hard at doing something that is providing value, then absolutely. But people sort of have this idea that if you are working hard, period, then you're entitled to whatever success entails and however they choose to define it. That's not the case. Again, if you're working hard, there's no guarantee that you're going to be creating value. The whole point is that you need to create value. And sometimes that's fair, sometimes that's not fair, but that's not the trademark of a capitalistic society. That's the trademark of life. If you are working really hard to build a house for yourself, and then a hurricane comes in and destroys it, you've worked really hard and you weren't successful. But that wasn't your fault necessarily. And it certainly wasn't the fault of capitalism. It's just the fault of living in a fallen world with decay and with destruction as sort of the natural order of things. And so it's one of those things where the underlying message is kind of correct, but the root anger and the way that they take it out is not it's like you're blaming someone for something that isn't their fault, really. And it's not because he's wrong, but because the spirit of the idea he's saying kind of is.
Yeah, this reminded me of a quote that I saw attributed to this German general, Kurt von Hammerstein, and he opposed Hitler. He was a communist himself, so he wasn't that much better, but he opposed Hitler and resigned. But he had this awesome quote that was basically like, "Hey, there are two types. People are made up of four characteristics. They're either lazy or ambitious, and they're either dumb or smart." And what I really want, how I deal with people, I categorize them. Like the people that are lazy and dumb, I give them the basic boring tasks to do. The people who are lazy and ambitious, those people I fire because they're very dangerous, because they're going to work really, really hard at the wrong thing, and they can cause so much damage by doing that. The people who are ambitious and smart, I hire them to work for me. And then the people who are ambitious or are smart but lazy, those are the type of people that you want to put in command positions, because they're going to figure out how to do things the easiest way and the most efficient manner. And I think about capitalism, like you're saying, just today I was working on a piece of music gear, and I didn't make a proper calculation. So I was working on this thing and trying to get all these inputs to line up and do these proper things. I spent about an hour on it. And because I missed a critical piece of information, my entire hour of work was basically worthless by the end of it. I did a bunch of work for no result and no value. And I think everyone has experienced that in some way. And that type of truth, that you can do a bunch of work and it doesn't result in what you want, cascades all the way up to the highest levels of society. The good news, and this is what brings me back to that German general's quote, is that like you can learn from that, right? So hard work doesn't guarantee success, but as long as you learn from that hard work, you are more likely to have success for less effort in the future. And that's awesome news. The problem with the progressives and the problem with the people that kind of have this like anger about hard work not guaranteeing success is that like conservatism and the like G.K. Chesterton's fence, so these pillars of society and like moral virtues and things that are really important that we've held and maybe we've lost the meaning from them over the years, but like they are basically the lessons learned from hard work not leading to value. They are the smart but lazy generals that have figured out how to do things with certain types of principles to evaluate work. And progressives are necessary for moving things forward. Like they're the ones that innovate. They're the ones that think that like, hey, we can do things better. But the best ones make sure that they're not blowing something up that like leads to lots of hard work for no value. And that's what happens when you've got like at an essentially planned economy like the Soviet Union. Like someone at the top thinks like, oh, this would be valuable for us to do. It doesn't mean that is in society. So they align all of the workers and they force everyone to do the work for that. And it doesn't end up with the result that they want, and people starve and die. And so that's the downside of progressives, is that they tend to tear down all of this wisdom and this knowledge that we've built up that makes it so that it's easy for us to get value with less amount of work, with the thought that like, oh, well, things aren't fair. It's like, well, things might not be fair, but maybe it not being fair is something that's going to happen regardless. And this principle makes it sure that at least even if it's not fair, we're getting some sort of result.
That's exactly right. I like the point you mentioned specifically about, you know, when you work hard and you get that skill, you are more likely to succeed. Because I think about, even in the very rudimentary example of thinking about like physically working hard at something that, you know, ends up collapsing or crumbling, like you become physically stronger, so that even if you were to do the same thing again, you would be able to do it more easily necessarily. And that's true again physically as well as mentally and spiritually. And there's times for rest, and there's times for, you know, this business venture failed, so I need to, you know, sort of mentally reset, replan, refigure things out. But ultimately, all experience is good experience to calculate and to learn. And the kinds of societies that benefit those skills of experience and of learning is a one in which you are free to pursue under the new knowledge and methods that you've learned. The more controlled and sort of rigid things are, and sort of a bureaucratic, this is the way we do things, controlled economy, and means that there isn't that freedom to say, hey, this method that we tried or this distribution didn't work out. I worked really hard, but it still didn't work. I want to change things, and you can't do that when you have a million bureaucrats deciding things and you have regulations in the way. And so a free economy, a capitalistic economy, a free market economy where it's all about voluntary interactions means so long as you show people the value of what you're doing and are able to make that voluntary exchange, you are free to pursue those ends however you want, using that new knowledge and that new experience and that new strength that you've gotten from any other sort of failed attempts. But it does take that sort of mental reset. So when you do fail, like, you don't just get down and quit. And I think that so many people in our generation, I even myself included, are scared to fail, when really you need to be able to take that step in order to find the best opportunities and best ways of doing things.
Yeah, like this take generally, like I would say it's true. Like hard work doesn't guarantee success, but like we've both been saying, the takeaway from it, which for most folks is like, oh, like it's either anger and jealousy and envy of people, and we need to reform society, or it's just general depression and sadness that like, oh, nothing matters, so therefore I should just kind of do whatever makes me happy. I think that the proper response to this is that, like, oh, this is good news. Like, it is just a fact of reality that you're going to fail. I had a college professor who's like, every time I fail, it's great because it means I'm closer to being successful. And he lived a long life and done really awesome. So I tend to believe him. And like that's great news, right? Like, hard work doesn't guarantee success, but it does guarantee we're going to get better at it, as long as you're committed to getting better and writing it off. And like, it's so, having done a startup in the past, it is so hard to, when you're building a business, there's so many variables, and there's so many things that you just don't know until you're there. And those things can be a deal breaker, and you're too far down the path that it's like, oh, you can't actually account for it. So it is going to be a failure. But next time you're in that situation, you'll probably recognize those types of signals and be able to account for it and make adjustments earlier on, or just never step foot into that business in the first place. And generally, there's a reason why. Like, I'm sure you've watched Finding Nemo. Like, when they're going to they're going through the like the valley, and there's all the dead like fish bones and stuff. And Marlin's like, oh, we don't want to go through there. We want to swim over the top. And Dory's like, no, someone told me we should swim through it. It's like, oh yeah, like there's certain people and certain experiences that as you're going up, you're like, okay, there's a bunch of dead bodies around. Should I continue going forward, or should I do something different? And like, progressives and people that are more like minded that way, they're awesome because they see the dead fish all around. They're like, we're going to still try it. I think we can be the ones that make it through, this valley. And sometimes when they make it through, they have an amazing tool that totally changes society and makes everyone's lives better. But for every one of those types of successes, there's hundreds of people that have failed. But the person that made that success, either they got really lucky on their first try, or chances are they were one of those hundreds that failed in the past at some point. So that's the good news, right? It's like, as long as you keep going, as long as you're able to survive it, chances are eventually you will be successful. You just got to stick to it.
Exactly right.
All right, moving on to our next one. We've got we got a few Super Bowl takes. So Donnie and I are streaming this on Monday. This is the Monday after the Super Bowl. I'm assuming you did not watch the sports ball event.
I didn't watch it, but I listened in and heard about it and stuff.
Okay, I haven't watched it in many years, and then yesterday we had family over because my daughter got dedicated at church, and so we were like, oh, let's just watch it. And I guess I'll save what I felt about it. But we got a take here. It's got a stadium full of NPCs with kind of a blank expression on their face, and this person writes, "Hope you all enjoyed your circus," with a clown face emoji. What do you think?
I think this is a terrible take, and I'm seeing this take dunked on, I would say rightly, all along the internet. I think that there is a point at which you can say there is an unhealthy obsession with sports, and there's an unhealthy amount of attention being given to celebrity culture or whatever. But the complete flip side of that is to say, any sort of big event that is meant for entertainment, this is not nearly as important as the politics of life and things. And yes, there are more important things.
The Jaden Smith meme,
yeah, right. And it's like, especially if you're trying to posit like you're so much more superior because you study politics or you talk about that, I just want to cringe at. If you're saying like, hey, maybe you're using this in your life as a little bit of an idol, and maybe you should prioritize things that are a little bit more important, like I would say spiritually, then I could see maybe there's an argument to be had there for sure. But the way that this is posited is not that, especially again when it's done in the realm of or in the posture of, instead of like politics being the utmost ideal. And I think that's extremely cringe. And I think that the moral superiority of this is ridiculous. And as I think Charles Cook put it, like, politics exists so that you can sort out the things that allow football to happen. Like, he might be a little bit more sort of government necessary than me, but even still, I would agree in that the purpose and the function of political speak is to get that stuff out of the way so that people can pursue what they want to pursue and do what they want to do, whether that's football or and then the other thing, of course, is that football, a big event getting a lot of Americans together, like culturally, that's a good thing. I don't see why you're mad that a bunch of people are excited to watch something together. Even if I don't particularly connect with it, I don't hate that people all like this one thing. That's good. Like, we need more things that helps us relate to other fellow humans that aren't just this artificial divide that politics makes in many cases.
It's interesting. I hearing your take on it makes me want to tell you to go waste 5 hours of your life and go watch it. Because I agree with you. Like, I agree with you in the vacuum of like, hey, let's go watch and enjoy football. Like, in the past, I don't watch football ever. I only ever watch football if I'm going to watch the Super Bowl, because like I enjoy, I guess, the strategy of the game and like seeing the best people do it. But I don't enjoy it enough to be like, oh, I want to go watch every single game every week. And I think a lot of other people do enjoy that part of it. But what's kind of sucks, man, like watching this whole deal, and I'm not really sure what this guy's intention was. But it was a circus, and it was a circus in the way that it was like, hey, we're all still one, but we're one under this like weird political division thing. Like they had like the Black National Anthem at the beginning, which was pretty bizarre. And then they have all these different like political statements throughout the game and stuff. And it's like, I would normally agree with you. That's like, hey, like politics is what's necessary for us to come together and enjoy things that should have no politics involved. Like this thing is like this weird facade of like we're all one America, but we're actually not. And it's this, I don't know, man. I really didn't enjoy watching it. It really disturbed me. I haven't watched the Super Bowl in several years, and everything from, like I was saying, the beginning opening ceremony stuff with the Black National Anthem to, you know, there's like one anthem for one people and another national anthem for other folks, and then the whole Taylor Swift thing and the Pfizer ads and the, you know, and then the halftime show with all of its debauchery. It's like, oh, this is like, it just looks like a decaying culture, man. And I don't have a problem with people just getting together to enjoy stuff. Like that's awesome. Like that's a good thing. But it seems like there's increasingly like less social things that we can do that don't involve these politics and stuff like that. And so I don't know. It's just a really, I think I'll opt out of the Super Bowl for several years again, because it's just like, it's like, oh, this is, as much as I enjoy watching football, it felt like most of it was not about that, and that's what's kind of sad and weird about it.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess the specific circumstances of this Super Bowl, I kind of don't get the impression that that's what this take is meant for.
Sure,
but even still, you could have a tighter critique of those things. Yes. I think. To me,
this looks like dunk on rainbows and puppies. Like, how dare you enjoy that when, you know, there's someone that is poor somewhere? It's like,
yeah, exactly.
I know what you're saying.
Yeah. So I sympathize, because to me, again, it seems like the thing that he's critiquing here is that people are all distracted from what really is important and matters. And to the degree at which they are artificially pumping in this sort of political divisive cringe, like, you know, having multiple national anthems for multiple peoples, or, you know, I also do not like the sort of lewdness of many of the halftime show stuff.
Oh, they're terrible.
But like, that's, to me, isn't the critique being leveled here. And so sure. I think those things are fair to critique and should be, and probably one of the reasons why I'm not going to watch it myself. You know, like I've watched football games in the past and have, you know, reasonably enjoyed it, but it's not like I'm going to go to the football, or a lot of people do watch the Super Bowl for that. I don't know. Just to me, it's, again, the critique being more leveled at the idea that there is, and one other thing I will say is, we may not have one singular country, but I still think that even just relating to other humans to say, oh, we all enjoy this thing, is a good thing, right? Whether or not you're saying this in the context of, oh, we're one America, one national identity, I don't care as much about that.
Yes.
But just like being able to come together with other people and be like, yeah, there's this, you know, again, what has historically been celebration of skill and athletic ability and tactical, you know, strength and admirable qualities of people performing at the top levels of a game, and that to me is worth celebrating.
Yes,
even if you sort of throw in all this other junk. Again, if that's the way that this guy means this critique, then I take all my stuff back. I just don't get that impression.
I think, to kind of expand on my point, because you're right. Like, obviously, we're very much like, if we had less of a national identity, that would be awesome in certain ways. Like, it was more like individual down to the states and towns and individual citizens. That's awesome. Like you're saying, though, also the celebration of skill and all those things are good things. I guess the icky feeling that I got, it would be like if I went to like if I knew one of my friends' marriages, like they were cheating on each other, and then they had like a 20-year like renewal of vows ceremony, and I knew they were both cheating on each other and saying awful things about each other, and they were just going through the motions. It's like, oh, that there's kind of a sick feeling to that, right? It's like,
Right.
this is not representative of the truth of what's going on, and it's almost in denial of like how things are, and these people are like, don't actually have any love for each other, but they're going to go through the actions like they are like care about each other. And so you watch a Super Bowl and you see like all these celebrities up in the box office deals that have said so many awful things about the people that are down in the stands. And then you've got like the announcers and different types of people that are, can't stand the normal populace. But there's like this belief that like, oh, like this is all patriotic and we care about this and that way. And it's like, oh, like it just seems like one big lie to me, like that side of it. And it fills me with just sadness and just a kind of a gross feeling. All that being said, the people that were able to watch it without any of that feeling, like, good for you. I'm happy. Please enjoy football, because that's awesome. And there's very few things in life that you can enjoy without that. But there's like just an overt sense of like trying to inject that in to it. And it's just, to me, it's just kind of fake and phony, and it's a bummer. I don't.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, again, assuming this person isn't leveling the critiques there, then all the worse for someone who is saying like, I care more about politics than I do this.
Yes.
Yes. Because it's like the politics is the thing ruining and destroying the good aspects of this, right? So
yeah. Exactly. Yep. Cool. All right, let's move on to our next one. So we've got Chris Murphy, and he writes, Republicans think people are so gullible that nobody will notice how they actually vote. Republicans are on the Senate floor now saying we should focus on fentanyl, not Ukraine. The same Republicans who just voted against a border bill that sent billions to stop fentanyl. What do you think?
This is such a stupid take. This is like the most, you are against the Patriot Act, therefore you are not a patriot type reasoning imaginable. And it just is so incredibly infuriating. So whether or not you support doing something on fentanyl in the ways in which politicians would do it, why do you think it is remotely like a gotcha to say, ho, Republicans say we need to focus on doing something on fentanyl, and yet they said we're not going to do something on fentanyl when it was attached to a bill that also did a bunch of other bad things that they don't like? It's just such an obvious, shallow game of marionettes that these politicians play, and I just wonder, how can anyone fall for it? How can anyone look at these politicians and think, wow, they really are, the Republicans really do just want to not do anything about fentanyl because they voted against it in that bill, not without, the laundry list of other things the bill did. Whether or not you support those things or don't, it's just such a stupid, shallow tactic that I had to throw this in here, because it's like, look, before you jump on a bandwagon of, wait, these people are hypocrites because they do or didn't support this bill, or they did, you just like look at what the bills actually do. The average American would be honestly shocked if they saw what kinds of nonsense bills do in this day and age. I don't know. It made me really mad.
Yeah, like I don't know if this is a like a term that is used for legislation, but like in the business world for like contracts and stuff, like a poison pill, right? Like it's like everything in the contract looks good except for this one aspect that they can't accept. And so that when they say like, oh, we're not going to accept that contract, instead of you like, it's like if I gave you a contract that said, hey, I'm going to give you $1 million, but in order for me to give you $1 million, there's a little asterisk that says I get to cut off both of your hands. And then you're like, well, heck no, I'm not going to sign this contract. And then I go and I say, yeah, Donnie, I want to give him $1 million, and he said no. And it's like, well, that's factually true, but you're leaving out some really important parts about it. And like you're saying with the Patriot Act and all these other things, like, yeah, you can have like certain types of, you can like play these political games, literally the definition of a political game, where you have certain bills that go to the floor that have like, oh yeah, we're compromising and being bipartisan, we're doing all this other stuff, but like you got to do this and do this in a way that compromises your values or has some unacceptable thing that I know you will never be able to vote for. And it's like, it's a double win for me, right? Because you either are not going to vote for this thing that you said you would support, and I can hit you on that. Or if you vote for it, then I can hit you on that you voted for this awful thing that I put in this bill. And it just should showcase to people why this whole political system doesn't really work. It's like, yeah, they leverage the legislation. It's not actually a tool for helping people. It's a tool for getting people either elected or unelected.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing about it too is it's like I mean, this is probably not where any of the Republicans are coming from. I think to do so would be to give them way too much credit. But the only way to address fentanyl apparently is by, dumping billions into stopping it. Whereas maybe the solution would be to, I don't know, like sever ties with the big pharmaceuticals and dismantle the FDA and have drug reform as a whole in the bigger picture. There's a lot of things that we can do that created this fentanyl crisis that don't involve spending more taxpayer dollars on some government program that's likely to not do a thing. So again, I doubt that this is the approach that many Republicans were taking or the reasons why they would vote against it. But it also just shows sort of the DC mindset and what I would call brain rot of thinking, oh, look, they say they're against the thing, and yet they don't want to spend billions to stop it. It's like, well, maybe there are other ways of stopping it that don't involve billions that are actually going to be more effective at addressing the root problem here.
Yeah, people always talk about these situations like, oh, it's so complicated and nuanced. Like, how dare you use broad, sweeping assertions of how you can solve this? Like, it requires that, type of discussion of and knowing the details, and then they introduce legislation that is just like throw money at it. And
yeah, exactly.
And it's like, okay, like how can you hold both of those ideas at once? That like, oh, this is so nuanced and so tricky that you have to have people on the ground looking at it, and oh, well, we could solve it just by throwing money at it. It's like how that's like the great contradiction of government is that we need to have people that can sift through all the information and be far enough away that they can look at it objectively, but they're not close enough to actually know how to solve it. So all they do is they just transfer money to their friends and hope that it gets solved in the best case. That's when they have good intentions. In the worst case, they're parasites that are looking at how they can extract as much value from you as possible, and it's baked into every single bill that they do. Like, it's just, I don't understand how people can see Nancy Pelosi or any of these Congress people go into their jobs and they make whatever it is, $190,000 a year, which is already way too much for producing nothing. And then they are able to merge with hundreds of millions of dollars after 40, 50 years of working. It's like, yeah, man, these people are figuring out ways to extract money. All the incentives are aligned to do that. And you are not getting richer. So obviously whatever they're doing is not benefiting you. So these people are the worst, and the legislation, they'll use it only as a way. It's a weapon for them. It's not. People think of legislation as like a way to help, but it's just a weapon to keep enriching themselves or to keep themselves in power.
Absolutely right.
All right, our next one is from a Twitter user, and they are quote retweeting a post, and it's got a picture of Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, who plays on the Kansas City Chiefs. They just won the Super Bowl. And it says Taylor Swift, Artist of the Year winner, and then the Super Bowl winner, Travis Kelce. This Twitter user quote retweets saying, "So weird and funny that MAGAs hate the whitest, most all-American dream couple of all time." What do you think? Is this a contradiction?
It's one of those things where if your perspective is, everything is racial, then even the hard evidence that things aren't racial become a question like, we need to investigate this weird contradiction. Everyone is racist, but why are people not being racist in this particular way that we think we would expect? It's such a tired, ridiculous. I mean, it's the same justification that we got from like the vaccine stuff, where it's like, oh man, just imagine how much worse it would be if we didn't take the vaccine. I still got sick, from, I still got COVID from the vaccine, even though I got the vaccine, but it would have been so much worse without it. It's this infinitely, unprovable goalpost shift. So it's like, well, there is racist, but it's so weird and funny that the Make America Great Again people hate this, even though they're the most white people. It's like, you made the accusation that anyone who supported Donald Trump was a white supremacist. So when that doesn't live up to your, when your prophecy isn't fulfilled, you don't get to say, it's really weird that this thing that I said should happen isn't happening. That's so odd. It's just such a goofy, ridiculous point. I almost don't know where to go.
Yeah, I people will get me for this because I literally just said I don't understand why people can vote for Nancy Pelosi while seeing all this other stuff. I actually do understand. They think that Nancy Pelosi is going to give them things that they want, even if she makes a bunch of money and she pitches that. But with this, like when someone says they don't understand something or how something like this person's saying, it's so weird and funny. Like, I don't understand how the MAGAs can hate the whitest, most all-American dream couple of all time. It means they actually probably have the wrong, like, axiomatic understanding of what drives, white megas out there. And it's like, because, I think most megas are cool with Thomas Sowell, who is a black economist, right? So you got to add it up. Like, this person's axiomatic understanding of Republicans, white Republicans, is that they're racist. They view everything through that lens. That's like a foundational principle that they start from whenever they're evaluating any sort of truth claim or anything that someone says. And so it's like, okay, it's, of course, this is not going to make any sense, right? It's like, well, how can Republicans like Thomas Sowell and then not like white Taylor Swift and white Travis Kelce, who's an American football hero? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Brain breaks. It's like, yeah, of course, it's because your foundational principle is wrong. Like, your foundational understanding of how these people think is completely wrong. And like, it makes more sense if you adjust, you'd be like, okay, what kind of values does Thomas Sowell express versus what Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, kind of puts out there? It's like, okay, well, Travis Kelce was in a Pfizer commercial. He kneeled for the national anthem. And he's very much on the whole woke agenda stuff. Taylor Swift endorsed Joe Biden. Thomas Sowell is a free market capitalist, and I don't know who he necessarily endorsed in 2016 or whatever, but he's out there and he's generally more Republican in his worldview. Isn't that a better way to understand that maybe that like Republicans and the people that like Thomas Sowell and don't like Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, it doesn't have anything to do with their skin color. It only has to do with the way they think and what they're thinking about. Once you have that, then it's like, oh yeah, then everything is squared away. Everything fits in its nice place. You can accurately predict what people are going to say and do and have opinions about in the future. But when you start out with such a foundational error, like, of course you're going to have this weird moment where you don't understand something and it's all bizarre to you and you're lost.
Yeah. It's almost like if you take like 2 seconds to listen to the perspective that is not yours and just hear what they are saying, maybe it would make a lick of sense to you. It makes me think of what we talked about last episode with the whole Putin interview with Tucker Carlson, where the mainstream media doesn't want you to even hear the opposite perspective. And, we're liberty minded, but you look at studies and it shows conservatives and people who identify as Republican are much better about understanding the perspective of someone on the left and hearing why they think or explaining why they think what they think, even if they disagree, than people from the left do to the right. And this is just another example of that. It's why, generally speaking, people right now who are more conservative are skeptical of the Ukraine intervention, want to hear from Putin, even if he's a thug and the head of a government. Because you want to hear the other perspective and see why the justification for doing something that might be initially wrong or evil, like to understand it at least. And the left is largely not interested in that, and that's exactly what's happening here. So if they took 2 seconds, and again, you don't have to agree with the MAGAs, but if you take 2 seconds to listen to them, hear why they feel the way they do, and then assume that to be true for a second, then you would understand why they're behaving the way that they're behaving. It's not rocket science.
Yeah. The other side of it, not the other side, but another aspect of this that I see is, people are really like, well, why is there so much hate for Taylor Swift? Why she's just a music artist that makes fun music that people like listening to. Like, what's the danger in that? And I saw a study that came out that like she influenced like 1 in 6 voters when polled, and I'm not familiar with like all the data on the study or like the background on how they conducted it, but at least this one study showed that 1 in 6 voters were more likely to vote for, or much more likely to vote for whoever Taylor Swift endorsed. So that's 1 in 6. Like that's pretty significant considering the 2020 election was decided by, like 180,000 votes or whatever it was. Like that's pretty big deal. And much broader than that is the fact that I think that Taylor Swift has this I'm just easygoing and everything is cool, and everything is fun and loving and great, and also I endorse killing babies, and also I endorse all these awful policies that destroy human lives and are awful and are not so innocuous. And the people that have bought into that she's just fun and awesome and that she's virtuous and great, but aren't willing to like look a little bit deeper at or consider deeper philosophical questions, are going to be easily misled by that. And so that's why conservatives don't like her. Like, just to explain the reason why conservatives have such a problem with Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, it's like, oh yeah, it's these deeper influencing of bad ideas that are opposed to what we consider virtue, kind of housed in this like fun, fake, plasticky thing that you don't have to take really seriously. So if Patel, this Twitter user, ever wants to understand, like, she can just listen to this podcast, and right there, that's why conservatives don't like Taylor Swift or Travis Kelce.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, moving on to our next one. We've got Joshua Reed Eagle quote retweeting Josh Smith from Break the Cycle. So Josh Smith wrote, "Can't wait to see the Pfizer COVID shot commercials during the Super Bowl." He was right. There were a bunch of them. "Nothing says how important a shot is like having to spend millions of dollars in advertising just to get people to take it." And then Joshua Reed Eagle quote retweeted this saying, "I, for one, think capitalism is great, especially when capitalism creates vaccines that save millions of lives." And he posts a cherry-picked chart of data showing vaccines being released and then deaths going down. What do you think about Josh Eagle's take?
Well, it's one of those things where it's so frustrating because initially my first just reaction is he completely is ignoring the actual take here, right? The take here is nothing says the free market like having to spend millions to tell people this life-saving shot is worthwhile, right? It's a fundamentally different thing than a ad campaign that's focused on trying to get, I don't know, people to buy a car, because, roughly speaking, a car is not necessary for life in the same way that people would say COVID was or is, right? And so it's one of those situations where the scale difference right off the bat is completely different when Joshua Reed Eagle is, or when someone would try to compare the idea of like, a life-saving vaccine spending a lot and like another consumer product spending a lot. So Josh Smith's point here is well taken, right? He's saying there's this thing that people are supposed to voluntarily voluntarily take, and nothing instills confidence in it than having to spend thousands and thousands of dollars of this thing that should be life-saving to tell people, please take it. And then Josh Reed Eagle shifts the goalpost, moves the conversation completely, and then just says, capitalism created the vaccine, which is just tenuously true.
Not even.
And not really within the realm of reality. But even if it was for the sake of argument, it's a non sequitur. It'd be like, me saying, hey, I've created this great product that I want everyone to use. And it's literally free. Please take it. It's going to make your life better. And no one takes it up, and everyone would kind of make fun of me for that. And then him being like, yeah, but the free market made it. And he'd be like, so what? No, that's not the point here. The point is that if it's free from me to you and people still don't want it, then maybe there's some skeptical, or there's something about the product I'm trying to give away for free anyway that you should be skeptical of.
It's like, when was the last time you saw an advertisement on the Super Bowl or anywhere ever for a fire extinguisher?
Yeah,
exactly. The life-saving device that you keep in your house for when there's a fire and you need to put it out and you can't get the fire department there in time. It's like, yeah, they don't have to advertise for that. The fire extinguisher companies are like, yeah, that's a waste of money because everyone is going to or should buy a fire extinguisher. We don't need to explain the reason why for it. It's self-evident. It extinguishes fires. If there was like a lot of competition or something like that, then maybe you want to like differentiate yourself. But there's not really a lot of ways to differentiate yourself with the fire extinguisher. So yeah, fire extinguisher companies, it's a waste of money to spend dollars on it. And so when you evaluate then like, okay, well then why is Pfizer, like you're saying, this life-saving drug that is so amazing, so important, and so awesome that, you know, everyone should take it? Like, yeah, why do they have to spend money on it? It's not because they've got to convince you to take it. It's because they're trying to run interference for themselves. And in the vacuum of, you know, like we were talking about, tenuously true that capitalism created the vaccine. Like, yeah, there's a different type of motive. There's some sort of public relations issue that they have to get through. It's not so they could sell more vaccines. It's because they're trying to mitigate something else. It's not if the market truly perceived this as it was, and it was actually a life-saving device, it's like, yeah, then you don't need to sell it. It sells itself, as they say. So I really liked your point that you made on that. The other aspect of it too is like, yeah, these were not created by capitalism. All of the risk was stripped out. Like, capitalism necessitates that there's risk so that the people that have resources and that have the boldness to go take those resources and invest them in something and potentially lose them are thinking about all the avenues and are most likely to succeed because they're hyper focused on the chances of failure and making sure that they mitigate it. That's what happens with awesome capitalist products. With the vaccine, like, all risk is taken away. The government says, hey, the taxpayer will both be mandated to take the shot, so you have a guaranteed product to sell. And then if it does injure anyone, or if it doesn't do what you say it does, then no one is going to have to pay for it. Everyone is what is the term? They are immune from any sort of lawsuits from the damages that the vaccine causes. So not only is there, you know, no risk associated with it, it's funded by people that are not actually wanting to take it, and then it's, you know, then it's pushed down upon people in a way that, you know, you don't get to say no to it, or at least they were trying to do that. So I don't know in what world this is like a capitalist product that was funded by the glories of the free market, because no one was asking for it like in that way. Like, if people were asking for it and wanted it so bad and it was that amazing and people wanted to build it, then like, yeah, then you would have people paying for it themselves. You wouldn't have to take it out of their tax dollars.
Yeah, that's I guess the last thing I'll say, that's a great point. Like, so Joshua Reed Eagles' whole thing is, you know, oh, this capitalism's great. It created this vaccine. It was effective. But the entire fact, like you highlight, that they're insulated from the consequences means that that's not capitalism. So even if let's for the sake of argument say that again that the vaccine is great and awesome, you don't get to brag on this from the free market perspective, because the free market means that you take the innovations riding high as well as the after effects of any particular crashes. So even if the vaccine, let's say, was entrepreneurially created through investment and through some individual going out and getting the research they needed and doing this all voluntarily, the moment it gets adopted and then forced on people, and there are these mass adoptions, people are getting paid in the government to, like doctors, and are getting government payments to give people these vaccinations, and then the company then insulates itself from the consequence. That's all distortions in the market right there. You no longer have the free market case for this product, because everything that comes out of that, every consequence after the fact, has been completely legally bound up through government protections and government forced adoption. So again, even if your argument was that it was developed through free market means, which again, not really a case that can be made, but even if it was, the moment you have sort of the mafia come in and put pressure on people to adopt it, you don't get to say, wow, this was such a great free market success.
Yeah. And for anyone curious about, you know, this chart that he puts in there, they're like, oh, they released the vaccines and deaths went down. Tom Woods has a fantastic ebook on it. It's called chartstheyforgot.com. You could go look at that, and he compares how, you know, by basically isolating the various data sources, like how people deceive you with these different charts and make it look like certain things were really effective and other things weren't, when in reality, it's just like, yeah, like the virus ran its course, bunch of people died, bunch of people got natural immunity, and they released the vaccine in a time frame where you can't actually properly review the results. And then any of the double-blind studies that they actually didn't show any increase in actual efficacy of preventing any of the transmission or anything like that. So we won't address those because we're kind of out of time, but chartstheyforgot.com is a great resource for that. And with that, I don't know if you have anything else, but if not, then I think we're good. Awesome. Well, folks, thanks for hanging out, and we'll catch you on the next one.